everyone, welcome to the Jamjargill Podcast. I am releasing this episode for January. It's my first one of the new year and the new way of doing things, so I really hope you enjoy it. I am going to be publishing one at the end of each month on the last Wednesday of each month going forward. I hope that gets the engagement going, because then you know what's coming. I've got a really special guest for you today who I will explain about on the episode, but our conversation went all into lots of depth around what she does and where she comes from and everything like that. And I didn't want to edit it down, so I've decided to break it out into 2 episodes, one which I will release for you this week and one which I'll release for you next week. So I really hope you enjoy that, and I really hope you tune in for the second episode. This is all about Katie Holland. She's incredible, such an inspiration, and I really hope you enjoy it. Take care. Hello everyone, welcome to the Jamjargill Podcast. I am Jill of jamjargill.com. I am also a virtual assistant over at JJG VA Services. So if you need any help or support with your business, then please drop me a line there. I'll put all the links below. This is the third hat which I wear of many, many hats, which is the Jamjargill Podcast, where my intention behind it is to interview interesting, holistic-based therapists to have an open discussion around holistic health, natural health, alternative health, different ways where you can take ownership of both your mental and your physical health yourself in natural ways, in affordable ways, outside of the medical system. I'm really excited for my guest today, which is Katie Holland. Katie, I met through a wonderful networking event, which I found on Eventbrite recently, called the Starseed Networking event, which is basically all holistic people, therapists, starseeds, as they like to be called, and just really, really interesting people. And Katie is a sacred dance therapist, a dance artist, an energy worker, and she is also the creator of something called Awakened Bellydance. She is based out of Cairo in Egypt. We've got another international guest today, so that's super exciting. Katie experienced a soul awakening at age 7 and her first Kundalini awakening at age 27. So we'll go into what that actually means when we start talking to Katie. So she's originally from England, but as I say, she's based in Egypt now, and Katie has lived and danced around the world since 2006. She has successfully expanded her business whilst performing for celebrities and studying with the masters of cultural dances, Tantra. You're going to have to help me with that word, Katie. Thank you. Sorry, I will edit that. Yoga, dynamic meditation, and healing techniques. Katie offers one-to-one online personal development and mentoring, webinars, workshops, and retreats, and training worldwide. And we will put all of Katie's links down below so you can click on them and find out even more about her after the show. Okay, so basically usual format for me talking to a holistic therapist. We're going to start with the first third. We're going to find out about Katie, find out about her specialism, find out where she's coming from, everything like that. Then we'll do second third. We're going to do a little bit of show and tell. So Katie's going to do some belly dancing with me, and we're going to talk about how that's done. And then final third, we'll just do a breakdown of the show and tell and just explain what we did in that space. And then we'll wrap up with all of Katie's details, where you can find her and what offering she has. Okay, so let's begin. Hi, Katie. Can you start us off with a basic bio of who you are? Obviously, we know you live in Cairo, but who do you live with and what do you do? If you just give us basic top level.
Okay, so I've lived in Egypt for the last year and a half, and been in Cairo for just over a year. Uh, I live with my husband, and he's from Saudi Arabia, and I'm from England.
How did you guys meet?
In a nightclub in Goa.
Oh, wow.
We
Truly international family then.
I was living in Goa. I lived in India for 9 years, and he was living in Bangalore, and he was studying there. And yeah, we just classic met in a nightclub, really. But yeah, that was almost 11 years ago now. So
Lovely.
yeah, and I have two young adult children who are both living in England at the moment, and they grew up with me on our travels and yeah, going to school in India and Bali. So
such an amazing start to life. I imagine, I mean, we could deep dive into that whole education in India versus education over here. I mean, I've just finished reading Think Like a Monk by Jay Shetty. And just to touch on this point very quickly, but he was obviously living in an ashram in India, and he part of that is that they teach the local school children, and he sort of sat in on a first day class with a young monk the first day, and he was kind of listening. It was when he first arrived in India, and then he was quizzing the monk afterwards, like, oh, what were you teaching them? And he was like, oh, it was their first day, so we're teaching them how to breathe. And it just blew my mind, that, and I think it obviously blew his mind too, because he was just like, oh, we'd be teaching the ABC. We wouldn't be teaching how to breathe. And it kind of blows your mind, because you're just like, ooh, which is actually a more important life skill? How to breathe or how to do your ABCs. I mean, that's just a deep thought to start the conversation. As I say, we could end up doing the whole podcast on that subject. So let's not digress too much, as I have a habit of doing. And let's go into, like, what can you tell us a bit about the history of belly dancing? I mean, I've done a few belly dance fitness videos and stuff like that, and I find it quite interesting, but it seems to me that it's something which is performed around the world, generally around the East and the Middle East. So just a bit more interested about finding out the detail of the cultural context for both the performer and the audience, and where it comes from, how it originated. So anything you can tell us around that?
okay, it's quite a hot topic, really, because nobody knows 100% for sure how it started.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of theories, and I can only say from my perspective and what I've experienced and what I do, because some people are kind of very rigid with, oh, it's from this, or it's from this, or it's from this. But I feel that there's actually many aspects to it, and some of them aren't as obvious as you would think. Also, because of living in India and learning about the temple priestesses there, or the Devadasis as they were called, I can see a correlation between there and the ancient temple priestesses of Egypt. And
Okay.
so I feel that, yeah, there was the kind of the arts, you could say, that were taught to the temple priestesses, and this included like music, dance, singing, working with the blue lotus, which again is like a whole other subject, which is a flower, like a lily, that I work with. And yeah, they were doing all kinds of things, like exploring astral travel and near-death experience consciously. And obviously the ancient Egyptians were very into immortality and life after death, or not dying. So there's that aspect of it, which I've been going deeper and deeper into since living here. then there's the pregnancy birth aspect, which I can say for me, with both my children, I was dancing, I was teaching throughout. I used the movements in labour. I used the movements afterwards as well to recover, and I've had several sort of osteopath physios tell me that because I had really huge babies, that and a cesarean as well with one of them, that yeah, belly dance really saved me because it strengthened my body so much, and it really tones the uterus and the internal muscles, because when you're creating those movements with your body, it's like an internal massage. It
Mm,
gives the strength in a different way than doing sit-ups or like working out in a
sure.
Pilates and stuff. It gives you strength, but it also gives you flexibility within the belly, within the hips. So it's very, yeah, it's very freeing, and it also promotes a body confidence. So a lot
Mm,
of women come for the social aspect, for
mm,
the, yeah, feeling good about themselves, because it doesn't matter about your age or your size,
mm,
and it's something that can be done by everybody. And when I first started classes, I was 15 and I'm 43 now. And I
mm.
remember thinking when I looked at my teacher, because she was 63, and I thought to
Wow,
myself, like, this is something I can do for the rest of my life. And
that's amazing.
yeah, it was really inspiring to realize that as a 15-year-old, and think,
Absolutely.
yeah, because I'd grown up doing ballet and tap and jazz, and I stopped when I was 13 because
It's very structured, isn't it? It's very, yeah.
yeah, yeah, and it's a different kind of discipline, and it wasn't for
Mm,
me. I knew
yeah,
I wanted to dance,
I'm the
so
same.
yeah.
I'm like, my hips weren't made for ballet. They were made for something else. I just wanted to touch on, from what you were saying there, about that's really interesting about the muscles which you use as a woman and how it strengthens your womb and everything like that. So is it safe for pregnant women to do as well?
Yes, it is. There's certain movements that you just have to be a bit careful with, and a couple of them that you have to avoid. Um, it depends. It's like anything. If somebody's already been learning belly dance and then they become pregnant, it's not so much of a shock for the body. But
Mm,
if it's a completely new thing, then
mm.
you just have to take it gently, and make sure that your teacher is aware about how to support you,
Yeah.
and yeah, and also listen to your body. And
Are there sort of specialisms within the training? As I'm just thinking in my own head, thinking out loud here, but like the comparison point to the yoga world, and do people actually go to belly dance in order to strengthen themselves for a natural birth? Is that something that some people do?
yeah, yeah, and this is
Yeah.
also the way that I worked with it as well. And I've had many women come to me. Also, a lot of women who are struggling to get pregnant
Mm-hmm.
become pregnant after belly dancing, because
Ah,
it kind of reaches the parts that other things don't, and you can
yeah.
see the circulation flowing. And yeah, there's a few babies in the world now through
Wow, that must be so rewarding.
yeah.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. And I think there's just so much about, our bodies in general. I kind of feel like this is part of the whole holistic conversation. And holistic, for anyone who doesn't really know what that all means, in addition to it being like the natural way, it's looking at the whole body as one and looking how everything relates to one another. And I think oftentimes, or my experience of more traditional medicine, is you focus in like, oh, you've got a headache, so it must be a problem with your head, but it's like in the holistic world, it's a lot more kind of, oh, so you have a headache, so how is that relating to your neck and your shoulders and your tension? And that's what I find so fascinating is, you know everything is connected. That is the whole body. And I kind of feel like for me, the experience of having children was life-changing in that way, in that I just really realized how incredible the body is, and the fact that it can grow another human being. That was like, obviously I knew that on paper, but actually physically experiencing it, it does change your mindset, and it makes you realize, I think, you know, we just take for granted our bodies, and we take for granted, you know, all the different things which are going on with them, and all the different organs which crack on and work, and everything like that. And oftentimes I feel like, especially in the Western world, we only really pay attention to it when it breaks or when it has challenges, you know. And that's what I love about the holistic world, is it's actually respecting it and treating it well, and doing the preventative care and doing the stretches and thinking about trying to balance out both sides of the body and everything like that. So just a little tangent there, so people can have an idea of what holistic health is all about and why I love it so much. Back to the history of belly dancing, is there anything else you want to add around the cultural history and how it came to being from your experience?
Yeah, the obvious thing that people always think of is about the harem and the dancing for the sultan and the performance aspect. So yes, India, the Middle East, there were harems, and consisting of,
Can you just explain what that is for people who don't know?
like say a king who
Okay.
has many, many, many wives, sometimes hundreds of
Okay.
wives. And yeah, and in India as well, the Rajputs in particular, they were doing this, and they, yeah, this, it was like a way of continuing the generations for them. So they had wives who would live together, and then I guess sort of took it in turns, really,
Right.
to be with the king. So, but this is also a misconception that yes, there was this idea of women performing in the courts, but also if you imagine that women living together, and I don't know if you've read the book The Red Tent, or know about, this is really interesting. It's a great book, and it's really about women dancing for each other and being there with each other, because the red tent is this idea that in those ancient times the women would bleed together, so they would all
Yeah.
go into the red tent and
Yeah.
kind of go through that ritual every month. And again, belly dance really helps with things like period pains, with backache, bellyache, and so it's really a community dance, because it's coming from people that lived in the desert. So all kinds of celebrations, it's always with music and dance, and like everybody together, whether it's in circle dances or line dances. And the modern day belly dance that you see today has come from that. So it's evolved so much over the last few hundred years in particular,
Mm.
and now there's lots of offshoots of it, but
Yeah.
yeah, and it's also a great way to activate Kundalini as well, which comes into what you were asking me about with my kind of Kundalini awakening.
Yeah, absolutely. So I, like, from my perspective, I know about Kundalini as Kundalini yoga, which I know is being a feminine energy, and being very much sound based and chakra based, and each chakra has a sound, like lam, yam, ham, ram, all those, you know, and it's all about doing chanting and repetitive movements, and how that can bring your body into balance and alignment. So that's my understanding of Kundalini. But you go, tell me about Kundalini from your world.
So again, you've got different aspects of it. A lot of people know Kundalini through Tantra and only related to sex, or like the idea
Okay.
of spiritualized sex. But Kundalini is actually um, it's your it's your energy becoming conscious. So
Okay.
everybody has this potential of awakening within themselves, because
Hmm.
we're
So this
already,
isn't a woman man thing, like both sexes can, or and
yeah,
everything in between
yeah,
can
yeah. Yeah, and I've
can
got
have
a
an
cat, and
awakening.
she's really got some Kundalini going on as
Mm.
well. So it's animals, people, everybody, because like everything is sensual and everything is made of energy. So it's like you're taking your energy up a few notches to a point that's more conscious, and then you can work with your energy in a different way, and especially creatively as well. Kundalini is is the life force. So life force is from the sacral, which is, yes, our sexual energy, but also we can create everything and anything from that place. So a Kundalini awakening, for most people, it comes through things like, say, Kundalini yoga, meditation, and it's considered to take lifetimes to do this. And then some people talk about that if you've already been working on it for lifetimes with this idea of reincarnation or like quantum lives, that you can then be in a life where you're sort of almost going towards the end of your journey with it, and so it can activate more easily. And then and some people are just very, very sensitive. So what happened to me was, when I was 27, I'd been doing a very strong form of yoga in India, and also I was already dancing, and not realizing at that point that even though I was dancing belly dance to perform and teach technically, you're building up energy in your body, because the movements are like sacred geometry. So it's activating and cultivating energy within your body, and that energy needs somewhere to go, like it needs a job. So everything combined, and I think also because of just the energy within India and the place that I was at that time, I was ripe for for having this activation, and it took me into a very different place, and I got a very clear message about creating Awakened Bellydance, and bringing belly dance into a more therapeutic experience.
So did it come to you, are you saying it came to you whilst you were dancing, or it came to you in a dream or meditation, or?
It was partly from when I was 7, and I still don't know exactly what was the point, but I woke up one day feeling very different and being very aware of different things, and I was seeing energy, I was having past life recall, I was having crazy dreams, I was astral traveling, I was suddenly awake. So for a 7-year-old, this was quite difficult to handle, and I was really scared as well, because I didn't have anyone to kind of teach me or support.
Well, so you didn't have people around you who knew about this stuff? It was
I did and I didn't. I was going to a clairvoyant circle with my parents, and I think this was also what part it opened me up, because I was doing chakra meditations and things like from when I was 7. So
that's young. So why were you doing sort of the clairvoyant stuff at that age? I mean, oftentimes people I know who kind of got into that younger were people who had lost someone. Was that your experience, or?
Yeah, my parents wanted to go because their parents, or 3 of them, had passed away. And I think they were looking for answers, for information,
closure, and
and my dad, from when he was a teenager, had always been interested in the more kind of spiritual side of things. So so they were going, and I wanted to go, and I said, can I come with you? And so for 3 years, I was attending these kind of like open circles. So this really opened me up psychically, but I think because I didn't know what was happening and I didn't speak about it, so the people around me didn't know what was happening to be able to support me. So it was all a bit messy, I suppose.
So why do you think, looking back on this, you didn't talk to people, even though you were going to that sort of thing? You didn't sort of say, hey, this is happening to me, what's this? Do you think it was a confidence thing, or
Maybe I just thought it was happening to everybody,
Okay.
and I didn't realize that it was something unusual.
Yeah.
And I suppose I was just so wrapped up with growing up
Yeah.
and having these sort of crazy dreams and dealing with that. And yeah, it was quite a strange time for me. And then I was at school, and yeah, it's like,
I guess this is the thing is, I think, our generation of mothers, to generalize, maybe are probably more of parents, not just mothers, that's not fair, of parents in general. I feel like there's a lot more of an open conversation around just childhood experiences and psychology in general. And if, my kids, I actively encourage that they ask me questions about everything, and I will talk to them in a very honest way, whether that be about their bodies, whether that be about what they think or whatever. And I'll try and talk to them. I won't sort of make up stories, and I'll just say, well, this is what I believe. Other people believe different things, and we'll have a very open discussion around things. And I think that's so important, because I think, maybe to a lesser degree, my childhood, and then previous to that, generations and generations going back, oftentimes things were explained away with stories which were just like, oh, we'll tell the kids a story, Santa Claus, or not that I'm saying that I don't buy into the Santa Claus thing, but to be honest, tangent alert again, but to be honest, if my kids turned around and said, does he exist? Then I'd be like, well, I wouldn't be black and white about it. I'd be like, oh, it's just a nice part of Christmas. I'd answer it in a way, that it was, I don't know. I think it's difficult, isn't it? Because it's that balance between childhood should be innocent and they should be able to believe in things, but then I think sometimes you end up setting them up to not be able to cope with adulthood by brushing over too much and going, oh, you don't need to worry about any of that, you're a child. And then you're 18, here it is all. And they all fall apart, and you're like, why did they fall apart? I don't know. But actually, I think if you sort of drip feed some of the stuff, for example, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here, but I'll try and keep it brief. But like my struggles with anxiety and sleep, I will say to the boys when I've had a bad night's sleep, and I'll say, I'll need you to be quieter. I need you to be kind to mummy because I've had a bad night's sleep. And to me, and the feedback I get off of them is they're then empathetic as humans, and they care about their classmates, and they, if someone is struggling, then they will go and help them and everything like that. Whereas the very old school approach was like, oh, don't worry about any of that. You don't need to worry about that. You don't need to worry about this. So I think it is a balance. But I just think, did you sort of learn out of that experience yourself to have more open conversations with your own children about experiencing things? And
we've always been really open with each other, and still now. They're 22 and 19 now, so it's very really sort of open communication, and I really wanted that from the beginning, and
that's great.
It's really lovely. Yeah,
I think this is it as well. It doesn't have to be a black and white world. We were told, or I think our parents were told, that you're not there to be friends with your kids, you're there to be their parent. And I'm like, well, why does it have to be one or the other? Like, I want to be best friends with my kids and be a parent. I think you can create this dynamic, and I certainly hope. And it's again around respect as well, and just like, I think if respect isn't demanded, if it's earned through honesty, through boundaries. I think there should be boundaries, there should be discipline. You know, I am still, you know, me and my husband are the bosses in this scenario, you know, and we decide when you go to bed, and we decide X, Y, and Z. But, you know, we value your opinion, and we want to know what your thoughts are, and we want to talk to you about stuff which you learn, and help you understand it in the best way we can, you know. So I think that's it. So it's really interesting to me as well what you were saying around the history of belly dancing, and when you were talking about that harem sort of setup and everything like that. Sort of two things occurred to me, if you just bear with me. One was that sort of setup is almost it kind of reflects nature and how, you know, animals in tribes sort of behave, in that there's one dominant male and there's lots of females and that sort of thing. So I find that interesting, that that's perhaps a reflection of how other animals and stuff reflect. But also the other thing that occurred to me, as you rightly said, is that yes, you know, those women were all together and they were all the wives, but actually that was an opportunity for them to bond and them to be friends and them to be a collective, and so it's not an entirely negative thing, you know. There's definitely different points of view on that, you know. So that's
and I think as well, because of the period of the Orientalist painters, when they first started coming to the Middle East, and you had all the, like, the Charleston, and in the early 1900s, when ancient Egypt was the thing, especially in England. And a lot of those paintings, beautiful as they are, were the artists' fantasies. So it's like with anything, the information that we've got isn't necessarily the truth of these bare-breasted women, and maybe some of them were, but it's if you look at the culture of the Middle East, to go around with your boobs out is not the thing.
No.
So there's a whole lot of mixed information, and this is why I can't say, like, from, and also I feel that because when Napoleon invaded Egypt, he killed, I don't even know, a lot of artists, so dancers, musicians, and thousands of them, and he chopped their heads off. And so I think from that point in particular, a lot of information was lost, because this was something that was like an oral tradition, you know. The moms would learn from their mum, the granddaughter would learn from the grandma, so it wasn't something that was necessarily written down. It's something from the social occasions, which, like today, you know, at weddings, and like people get up and dance, and they learn the movements from watching each other. So young children, men as well, they grow up, and yeah, they learn these particular movements, which are then expanded for the more sort of aesthetic performance side on stage. Yeah.
That's really interesting. I mean, there's a rabbit hole to be had there with sort of colonization and everything like that, and the detrimental effect on that and the whole world, really. But what I find interesting in that piece is that how people have bounced back from that, and how people have reclaimed their culture. And I think that's a beautiful thing, that people do sort of circle back round. And that's why I love the sort of circular postmodern kind of interpretation of history, rather than a linear sort of proceeding through time, getting richer and richer, because whenever people try and follow that line, it always crashes and burns in some sort of war or some sort of disaster at some point. Whereas actually circling back round and learning from your ancestors and everything like that, I find that fascinating, that people do that. And equally, that I love the concept that we are all creators, we are all like beings of creation, and how interconnected music and beats and art and self-expression, how that's so innately part of being human. I think that's a beautiful thing, and how it's captured in so many ways all over the world in so many different ways. So I think that's really interesting. I mean, the next question, which I kind of wanted to get into discussion around, was the juxtaposition of the process of belly dancing and doing belly dancing, the juxtaposition between the empowerment of the woman who is doing the performance versus service to the audience, meaning that, you know, are people doing it for themselves, for self-expression and everything like that, or are they doing it as a performance piece for others to enjoy? And also how it compares to something like burlesque or pole dancing, just to grab into other specialisms, I guess, which are seen as erotic dance, but to me are becoming more and more about women's empowerment versus doing a performance for somebody. So I just find that whole piece really interesting, and how almost women reclaim it as their own, and then through being confident and delivering it like that, then it's enjoyable to the audience and enjoyable to them. And I think that speaks to, you know, as I get older, women's sexuality in general is actually taking ownership of it is the most powerful thing you can do, really.
Yeah, okay, it's quite a big topic.
Sorry. I kind of went on.
All right, so to begin with, I feel that you as you, an individual, anything that you choose to make you feel empowered is going to make you feel empowered. And this can be with anything, not only with dance. You can say, I'm going to drink this water and it's going to make me feel empowered. You know, it can be anything. And I think it's the agenda or the intention that somebody goes into it with. And I have friends who are pole dancers, burlesque dancers, strippers, belly dancers, and they're doing it because they love it and they enjoy it. And in each of those sort of art forms, because they are, you know, you really can bring the art out in everything. It takes a lot of skill to do that. And you're always going to have the polarity of everything. So some people, yes, I've met in India women who they weren't trained dancers, who had been brought from other countries to dance and to perform, and their passports had been taken away, and you know, it's like it wasn't a good situation. And there was one who I helped to be able to leave India as well. So I was performing as I always have been, because I believe that belly dance, and also belly dance, it comes from Napoleon as well. They called it danse de ventre, which means dance of the stomach, which was meant to be derogatory because the stomach is like where your intestines and everything are.
Right.
So I say belly dance because it's the most recognizable word, but actually the movements come from your legs and your knees. So if it was to be specific, it would be called the knee dance. So,
Interesting.
yeah, so in Arabic it's called Iraq Sharki. Some people call it Oriental dance, Middle Eastern dance, and again there's a bit of a kind of discussion between dancers about what the actual name should be, because belly dance hasn't got so much of a good image because of that word and how it's been used. So yeah, I've seen everything that you mentioned. I've seen it done as like a really, wow, this is like a beautiful presentation, and I've also seen it in what I don't think it is so nice a presentation, but then that's only my point of view. So I guess over the years I've met so many people doing so many different things, and women in different situations, and nobody can say I wouldn't do that until they're in that situation.
Sure.
And and sometimes I've done shows because for bread and butter money, I didn't particularly want to do that show
Yeah.
maybe for that event. It was still something like a decent event, but I knew that it's not going to be exactly the way that I wanted it. So it's like there's always going to be a compromise, and then you get to the point where you just say no, that I'm only doing really what I choose to do. But
I guess, that is just a discussion around being an artist in a way and being a creative person. I can speak to that in my own work and stuff as I find my own path with my own work, and I find my energy matches with certain clients and doesn't match with other clients, and I kind of feel like I leave some other clients behind, and sometimes it never gets past the discovery call. Sometimes you just understand from talking in a discovery call that you're not each other's kind of person, and that's the sort of joy of being an entrepreneur, I think, is that you kind of having the belief that the right kind of people will come in and there will be people there to work. But I think that's one aspect of that. I think obviously the danger with something like dance of that nature as well is that I guess there's the side of it where people are forced into that situation, as you sort of briefly touched on, or there's things where people are doing stuff with their own bodies where they don't feel comfortable, but they're doing it in service to someone else because they feel like they have to. All that sort of side is obviously, we have huge respect. I just want to put up and say we have huge respect for all that spectrum of stuff and how dangerous that whole scenario can be. But it seems to me that is not what you're talking about as how you experience it and the forums which you're doing it in. I think fundamentally, if women feel empowered and they're doing it out of choice, then it's a beautiful thing, regardless of what form it takes, whether that be pole dancing, whether that be hip hop dancing, whether that be, all the many different forms of dance, exercise, art, all these things. I think it's always important to feel in your own energy, feel empowered, and learn the lessons, because obviously there's a big spectrum there. And maybe sometimes you end up doing things which made you feel a little bit uncomfortable. You think to yourself, oh, why did I say yes to that? But then you learn from it, and you set your own boundaries, your own guidelines going forward, that actually next time I probably wouldn't say yes to that. And that's within the realms of safety, but just picking out your own path within it, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, for any artist, it's learning to value yourself and your self-worth. And
Any human.
yeah, yeah. And
Learning to
sometimes,
value yourself. I think that's the joy, and to me, of getting older, is knowing your own mind, knowing your own limitations, and actually having the confidence to say, this is what I have on offer, or this is like, I'm in charge here, this is my body. That's a really important space to be in, and to learn how to get into more, because then the joy of that is then there's enough space for everyone, isn't there? Because everyone has their own way and things and everything like that. So it's just feeling empowered yourself and not feeling forced into anything yourself. So I think that's an important thing. I don't know if that's something that you teach as part of the belly dancing thing, is that, hey, this is a physical skill I'm teaching you, but listen to your body. I mean, it's more of a holistic way that you teach.
yeah, I mean, with the say the technique side of belly dance, people come, they want to learn the movements and choreography. I find that this self-confidence and empowerment happens naturally because
Okay.
they're connecting with their body. They're like, wow, look at this amazing stuff that I can do with myself.
Yeah.
I never imagined. And then with Awakened Bellydance, which is more on the kind of therapy side, but yeah, there's a huge focus about self-empowerment and like cultivating this energy, as I spoke about with the Kundalini. And then like, okay, so what are you going to bring to the world with your magical energy, because it's
Mm.
like you're kind of bringing it up and through you, and then you're empowering yourself, and how can you support others to empower themselves, so
Yeah.
that everybody rises. It's not elitist that, okay, I'm going to be empowered and above
Yeah.
you all. It's like, I
I
can't do
love
it for
that.
you, but I can take you on the path, on your journey
Yeah.
to your own empowerment, and then it's even stronger because people take responsibility for themselves. They become more aware, and also working more with the kind of shadow aspects of the self as well, which I know is a bit of a buzzword at the moment, but is
Explain what you mean by that.
so it's like the parts of you that you repress, or that you don't want people in general to know about you. So
Okay.
this could be like ways that you behave, like patterns, like a sort of anger, that people think that you're very calm and sweet and shy, but
Mm.
underneath you've got this kind of raging fury. and
Mm.
um, and it can be a multitude of things, but it's like the parts of you that you don't really want to deal with, and you don't want other people to see it, and you don't really want to see it yourself, so it gets like pushed and pushed
Push
and pushed.
down.
And then it's the masks that you're then presenting to the world,
Be a
instead of,
good girl.
yeah, exactly, instead of an integrated version of you. So
Yeah.
I'm working very much in that way of, like, own your shit, basically,
Yeah.
like, yes, you have these things that you think are shadows, or negative about yourself, but actually there's a lot of power in integrating that, and in owning that, and like, yes, I
Mm.
can be a shit sometimes, but
Yeah.
like, I know it, and I'm working with it, and yeah,
Yeah.
it's so
But
I'm
it
focused.
is again that whole piece around, you are not your feelings. Your feelings are like part of the spectrum, which is you, or whatever. It's like you are not your thoughts. Your thoughts are there. It doesn't mean that you are anger. Anger is something that you experience and something which you're learning to deal with. And I think quite rightly, if you take it out of the shadows and you're actually dealing with it, it's a far more therapeutic, it's a far more, I guess, again, holistic,
Healthy. It's
um,
much more healthy,
and positive way to deal with it and actually work through it, versus ignoring it, pushing it down, and then it suddenly explodes on you and can do a lot more damage for both yourself and everyone around you.
that also for people to realize what you said about the thoughts, is that a lot of thoughts that we have, so again, using anger as an example, it isn't necessarily your anger. Like, there is a part of acknowledging, yes, there is part of me that's angry, but also, am I feeling the anger of the collective? Am I feeling the anger of my parents, of my great
That's really
grandparents?
interesting.
And this then goes into epigenetics, which is this science of, um, how emotions are passed on through the
Mm,
generations. So this
that's
is really interesting.
fascinating.
Yeah.
It's so fascinating. There's so much more we have to learn, Katie. There really is. But I think we're getting there. I think with each generation, we're kind of delving that little bit deeper as well, aren't we? Okay, so we've talked a lot around like belly dance, its history, the ins and outs of that as a dance for people and empowerment and everything. How did you come to it in your own life in the first place, belly dancing?
Okay. As I mentioned, I was dancing from when I was 3, and so I very much had this feeling I want to be a dancer, but I didn't know what kind of dance.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was 14, I saw a video of U2 in concert, and they had a belly dancer in the song Mysterious Ways. So this is
Okay.
from like early 90s, I guess, when it was
Yeah.
very young. I watched it sort of mid 90s. So I saw this dancer, and immediately I just said, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I want to do. So I was in my first year of GCSEs at the time in England. and we had a careers interview, and she said to me, okay, for A levels and the usual thing. So I said, I want to do art and history. And she said, okay, well, you need to choose 4. And I said, no, I want to do 2. And and I said, actually, I really want to be a belly dancer. And this was one of these amazing moments where people are always shocked, because she could have turned around and said, don't be ridiculous. But she said, okay, I know there's some classes for adult education. I'll find out for you and I'll send them to you.
Oh, good on her.
It's amazing. Yeah, and she said, but what about these 4 A levels? And I said, you know what, I'm going to go to art college. So
Yeah.
So anyway,
You were
she's
lucky to have an open-minded career advice there, because my memory of that was everyone turning up to school in their parents' suits. And then like the only feedback I got was that I didn't make eye contact enough with the person, and so I was going to fail at all interviews. So that was
I don't remember anything else about
not
it.
so much of a positive experience. But yeah.
It was really one of those magic moments. And
Yeah.
she did that. She actually posted it to me at school, and I've still got it actually at my mum's in a folder. And so unfortunately I couldn't make it to those classes. They were on the other side of Leicester where I lived, and I couldn't get there. And so I searched for a year, and then my mum found an article in a local free newspaper, and it was about growing old gracefully, or something it was called. And there was this lady, Sylvia, who became my first teacher. And I started learning with her, and then after 2 or 3 years, I started to assist her, because she was mid-60s by then. So she said, okay, I'll be the voice and you be the body.
Oh, wow.
So I got this really brilliant learning about how to teach, because I had to make sure that what I did was exactly what she said, so that the class could.
That's an amazing mentor to have found. So so your parents were supportive of your dream in this instance as well.
They've always supported me, and and I just carried on from there. So by the time I was 19, I was teaching on my own and performing with a band, and I just built it up from that really, and then along the way I've studied other styles of dance as well, and then more kind of sacred dance, so like Sufi whirling and classical Indian dance and Balinese dance when I lived there, and there's a whole list of things. So
yeah,
and then also
absolutely. I mean, my next question is, what has it taught you? Which is like obviously it's a big question, but I guess I don't mean it in the sense of skill set. What has it taught you? I kind of mean it in life. What has it taught you?
This is kind of, it's hard as well to answer, because it's something that's always been there. Because if you imagine, I've started when I was 15, I've had 2 children, I've got divorced, I've lived in several countries. I've had
it's been your pillar throughout.
Yeah, it's like whatever's been happening in my life, I've been dancing. And this was something from a young age that I realized that when I danced, I feel happy. So this continued. And I think one of the things that it's shown me is that there's like always been a huge synchronicity, or a guiding light through this for me, because Sylvia, who I said was my first teacher, after about 10 years of dancing with her, I found this old newspaper article from when I was about 8, and it was like a local fete thing at the park, and I used to go with my nan, and I'd always known that me and my sister and my nan and my dad, our photo was taken to show, like children enjoying the fair type thing. But I'd never noticed that there were these photos of belly dancers that performed that day. And when I looked at it, I saw that the main picture was Sylvia, my first teacher. And we managed to get the original photographs, because I thought maybe I was watching it, because I didn't have any memory of seeing these belly dancers. And I found myself, I got a magnifying glass, because there was a crowd, it was on the park, And I found myself in my, like Bermuda shorts, luminous Bermuda shorts with a fringe. And I'm like this at the rope watching. And I
Yeah.
thought, oh my God, like that seed was already there.
Yeah.
And that link was already there that then 7 years later, I
That's
found
so
it.
interesting how it all connects up. I mean, just to give you a tiny bit of my comparable story with yoga is just really interesting, because my first yoga teacher again was someone who had her own challenges in life. She actually had MS, and and I went there again when I was 15, and dealing with stress of GCSEs. And she'd managed to completely prevent her deterioration. She should have been in a wheelchair, but through doing yoga daily, she'd managed to keep herself out of the wheelchair and keep active. And I think my mind, even my young mind at that point, was completely blown by that. So that was really fundamental for me. And I've loved yoga ever since. But what's really interesting is my granddad, who actually died when I was 6. So he was actually posted in India during the war. And so he was like a Scottish businessman, not at all a traditional advocate of yoga, but he apparently practiced yoga because he was posted in India during the war. So I just found that really interesting, that you do have connections through the generations of your family sometimes. And it kind of is that sense of it is meant to be, actually. So that's really interesting.
Almost like you have this this life path
Mm.
that's like a constant thread, and maybe you do this along it, but
Yeah.
there's always something that's drawing you back to it.
But that's the interesting thing about the discussion. Again, it's something we could go down a rabbit hole, the discussion around destiny and stuff, but I don't see destiny as a linear thing again. I think it's something, I like that description of thread which goes through your life, and I think, it's not that your path is set and you don't have options, because you have many, many, many options, but something ends up feeding through. And almost, I find it takes the perspective of looking back on your life to go, oh, look how that turned out. That's really I guess the goal is to try and learn to be more aware as you're living it. That's really,
because mostly we're trying to control it, and
yeah.
I want it this way, I want it that way, and actually there's a bigger energy or bigger power that has a lot more possibilities than our little brains will let us.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because, I'm a spiritual agnostic. I don't affiliate with any specific religion or anything, but I can definitely relate to, from the psychological perspective, people who have personal faith and believe that everything will turn out okay, how nurturing a thought that must be. To just have that core belief system of, oh, it's okay though, whatever happens, it will be okay, is a pretty empowering, amazing thought, isn't it? So regardless of your belief system. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I love that perspective of that life challenges are always sent to teach you, and the absolute best thing you can do in any given situations, whether it be good or be bad, be like, well, what is this here to teach me? I think that's a really great filter.
Yeah, and what is amazing in this that I'm not realizing, even if it feels like the worst thing to ever happen to you, but what am I missing about this that I could learn or I can grow from?
Yeah, absolutely. So that rounds up for you episode 1 of the Katie Holland interview, where we really went into the background of how she became a belly dancer and empowerment coach, and all the details around the history of belly dancing and all the ins and outs of it all. So I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. To look forward to in the next episode coming out next week, we have the example section and then the breakdown. So she's going to talk me through some exercises within the belly dancing space, within the empowerment space, and that's going to start off our episode for us. And then she's going to break that down and explain what we did and why. So I really hope you enjoy that part of the conversation, and I'll see you next week. Take care, everyone.